Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today's guests are Emily and Jean Trowbridge, and I'm so proud and happy to announce they've recently launched their podcast, Hey, Am I Adopted? And it's been so much fun. I've been following the show, involved, of course, with the distribution. And first off, I just want to say, Emily and Jean, thank you so much for making some time for me out of your recording schedule to be on the show. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, all right, appreciate it, Adam.
We have so much to talk about through the first couple of episodes, and we're definitely going to do a deep dive into the show and the format, the vision. I know it's a newer show. I definitely want my audience to check it out. But before we get into all that, we'll start this episode the way that we start them all, with what we like to call our Mission Matters Minute. So Emily, Jean, we at Mission Matters, we amplify stories for entrepreneurs, executives, and experts. That's what we do. Emily, Jean, what mission matters to you both?
So our mission matters is to create a platform for adoptees to listen, relate, and share their stories.
That's right, Emily. And I just want to amplify the fact that our mission is for adoptees. There are a lot of great podcasts out there for adoptive parents and what to do when you're looking to adopt a baby, but that's not what we are. We're a family of 4 adoptees. And so Kay, my wife, and I, of course, are adoptive parents, but we concentrate on telling the story of being 4 adoptees. And all the stories are different, right, Adam?
Oh my gosh, they are. And I think this is a great place to start is, why did you feel, I know you both put in a lot of work into kind of looking at different podcasts that were out there in general, and in adoptees, one that's specifically telling the story of adoptees. Why did you feel that was so important to get out there?
I'll take this one. So my dad, he's a securities attorney. And so he's ran his own podcast now for years and interviews people. And I get to watch him on stage all the time and this and that. And over the course of our life, we've talked about adoption. It's very big in our family, big thing. And as I started doing some research for myself, for personal reasons, just curious, there wasn't anything out there. Or there was a podcast about, like my dad said, adopted parents or what it's like to adopt a child. And it was kind of almost sad. I was like, wow, there's like no one that I can relate to, or someone that I might have my story besides my own family. And so I said to my dad, I go, what about us? Why don't you talk all the time? I talk a lot. So why don't we create a podcast? What do you think? And at first he kind of was like, I don't know, Emily, I don't know who would listen to this. I don't get it. And then we kind of started talking about it. And then actually in 2023, for Christmas, my dad gifted me the experience. And ultimately, my biggest thing too is I got to spend time with my family talking about it. And I didn't know that it was going to be that big, but that's really been the biggest impact for me. So that was the big reason behind it. For me.
Yeah. What about you, Jean? Like, what, as you kind of dug through this?
When Emily brought up the issue about 2 years ago, I thought it was like many other issues that Emily brought up. If I just ignored it, it'll go.
I'm going to fall out of my chair.
and we're all busy. Emily's a very busy person. I'm busy. And so I just let it all go away, but it never went away. And it kind of got me when she said, if we had this podcast and we had these episodes after I'm gone, she'd be able to look at me and listen to me and rewind our stories. And that would be the same with Kay and myself, because we're both in our mid-70s. And that could happen. We've all been adopted from day one. We all know that. But in different stages of our life, it's meant different things. So that's what kind of got me. And then, quite honestly, I figured if we did it, she'd shut up about it. Quite honestly, Adam, I told you before, I told Emily, I said, well, that's good. We've got about 4 episodes. Yeah. There's 4 of us. We have an episode on each of us, and then it's over. What are we going to do next? But I did see one other thing. I did see one or two podcasts that say they're talking about adoptees, but they're not talking to adoptees. They're talking who wrote books about being adopted, and that isn't necessarily where we're going. As you can tell from the first 3 or 4 episodes you've listened to, Adam and Emily, you know this. There's a lot of tangents.
Yeah.
A lot of tangents we can go on because we're the adoptees.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's going to be cool. I've actually learned a lot about myself. I think in episode 9 we did another one about me, and it was much different than the first one we did about me. I've learned some stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what's been the coolest thing too, is that for me, I think I wanted to learn more about myself and express what I felt. Like, you know, we have a very open family, and that's amazing. But it's different when you say it out loud, and you know other people can hear you. It's very vulnerable to do that, and I think that also gives maybe the listener, you know, a little bit like, okay, if you're saying that, there's something about that that's really nice and relatable, I think. And so even if you're not adopted, I think it's still like these stories that you can hear and go, maybe I felt like that or experienced that in my life too. Mm-hmm. So that to me was like a big deal. But what's been so interesting is how much we're learning about ourselves or each other along the way, which I think was my dad's biggest fear when we went into this, was that he's like, well, there's things you don't know about me. Yeah. I'm like, that's kind of the fun part, you know, tell me more.
And from the outside looking in, I'm telling you, I'm through episode 2. I'm looking forward to the next episode, which is going to be your story, Emily. And I'll say that, you know, as an outsider looking in and waiting for the next episode, I feel like I'm part of the family. It's so interesting because I feel like I'm sitting at the table with you, with both of you. And then also being your wife, obviously on episode 1. And I feel like I'm there as part of the family. I'm curious, as you've been sharing this around, like, you know, your circles and whatnot, like what's been the feedback so far, especially for maybe people that know you?
Well, for me, I shared it with some friends. And so some of my friends, you know, my parents are big characters. They have it going
big
on.
Big personalities, not characters.
And so it was like the cutest response a consistent one I get is, oh my gosh, it sounds just like how your parents are all the time. It's like sitting out on a boat ride on their dock, out on their boat, and just listening to them go back and forth all day long. They're like, it feels just like you're at home. So that's nice. It's nice to hear also people who don't know my family. They know me through whatever aspect in life. They're just like, I didn't know this about you. And I didn't know this about your family. And I like that they think it's also unique. They're like, that's so cool that you guys talk about this. And then the biggest one, because I sent that to you, Dad. There was someone who had reached out to me on Instagram saying that they weren't adopted, but they were like, the feelings of what you're expressing, they're like, I felt this way, and I've never been able to have anyone explain it so well. And
that person's feeling was rejection, right? Mm-hmm. Even though they weren't adopted, they gathered the thought about rejection, and that's interesting. One of the things that we talked about on the last episode that is creeping into my story is the application of being an only child adopted. And Emily had a sibling. Kay has a sibling. Except for a couple months, I never had a sibling. And just as foreshadowing, you've got to get to my episode where I talked about the Mary Beth incident. But anyhow, what do you do when you're an only child? There's a whole characteristic that I studied a long time in my life about what does an only child do. Now I'm digging more into how does an adoptee act? How does an adopted only child act? I mean, it's amazing I haven't shot myself yet. You know, I think no wonder I'm so screwed up, you know. And for me, it's all about just walking out of the picture. It's so easy for me just to walk out of the picture. I work alone. I have always worked alone. I love working alone. And I don't know which one plays on me more, being the only child or being the adoptee. And I think they come together in an interesting place.
Oh, I haven't gotten to that episode yet. I'm excited though. This is good. This is like getting to the, as you were going through this, and I know, and for the listeners, when you start getting into this show, you're going to hear some of the active learning side of things between family members. So for example, Emma, like I remember one of the stories that you mentioned, Jean, you're like, have you heard this story? And Emily's like, no, I haven't heard this story. Like, tell me. And so like you're learning actively as about, and so is the audience as well at the same time. So I'm curious just whether it's creatively or otherwise, when you're like, there's got to be some self-reflection or something else going. Are you also maybe learning about yourselves as you go through this process?
Absolutely. I think for me, and this is what I did expect from this a little bit, like when I thought about doing this, and then my dad said, yeah, let's do it. And I talked over with some friends and whatnot. The biggest thing is people, like he said, I said earlier, you're going to find out things, or there's things you don't know about me. And everyone was worried, well, how is that going to change? And I was like, I don't think it's going to change. I think it's going to explain things. And that's been the biggest impact for me too, with both my parents, is that being so lucky to hear their stories. It's almost like you have a related, like not even a relatability, just an origin to their story that you're like, that's maybe why you do the things you do the way you do them. And it just kind of, it's like I said, it's an explanation of kind of who they are in such an in-depth form that you didn't know bothered them. And then to the other point is some of the stuff that we've talked about in these next episodes you haven't heard yet. It's really the impact of specifically like traumas that adoptees go through and what the stigma of those words are and how that affects us each. And that's been fun. And it's been so great to have my mom be part of the show as well, because then you get 3 different, ways of thinking about it. And and I learned every time we get off of an episode, there's like a phone call a day later, like, I didn't think about that. Now I'm thinking about that. Now I'm racking my brain about this. So it's been kind of interesting.
One of the things that's happened to your mom and I, because Emily's up in Utah and we're down here in Orange County, and your mom and I are finding ourselves spending more time talking about it, talking about the journey, talking about the, as Jimmy Buffett says, some of it's magic and some of it's tragic, because we've had a tragedy in our family. And we talk about it a lot right now than we have in the past. And we conjure up things that we hadn't remembered and thoughts. And it's quite emotional for the two of us, and surprising in a good way. In a good way,
I'm sending, just so you know, I'm sending these episodes to my mom. I don't know. She doesn't know what a podcast is. She hasn't listened to podcasts ever. And I'm like, Mom, that's what I do for a living. She's like, okay. Like, I'm on Facebook. Is it on Facebook? That's all she knows. Whatever.
That's cute.
But anyway, I'm like, Mom, I said, Mom, should we do a podcast? She's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, but then I thought about it and I'm like, wow, it would be such an interesting and nice thing to have that experience with my mom and to have that type of those conversations with her. And I was, as I've been going through it, and I'm like, there's just so many layers of benefit to what you're doing, in my opinion, to inspire others. Like, think about it. I'm even thinking about launching the show with my mom now, be based off of your show, because I see it and I see that connection. And I'm like, it's an amazing thing when I think about my grandparents and their stories and all the things, let's just say, along the way that have been kind of lost. Like, I don't really know the stories that well of my grandparents, and definitely not from their voices, like not at all, like not really. So I maybe know some of it that my parents told me a little bit about, but not too much. So I think it's an interesting way to also bond as a family. And it's interesting to let others into your lives as well. So for example, myself being able to listen in and the audience be able to listen in at any point, like in your process where you kind of like hesitant, like, do I want these stories out there? Or like what kept you going? Because this is what I'm grappling with, by the way. So I'm asking this for me, not the audience, because I'm like, do I want my mom behind the mic talking about me as a kid? I don't know.
Well, Emily, let me answer that question first. In the 9 episodes we've done, I don't think I have had one thought about the audience. My whole deal is Emily and Kay.
Oh.
I mean, Kay's always sitting alongside of me when we do it. We do it from our home, and then Emily is, maybe she's at home, but she's sitting in the dining room, and then maybe she's in Utah at the time. And I think it's a closed conversation. I have never dealt with it, but I will say one thing on a different topic. When I've talked to people about doing this, people who aren't adopted say, "Oh, I want to listen."
Oh, yeah.
That's a surprise. That's very much of a surprise to me. And I don't think they want to listen because I'm so cool. They want to listen to me babble on. But there are a lot of people out there who have a great view of our family. Right, Emily?
Yeah.
We present a family out there, and I think people might want to see that. Well, that's my answer to that question. I hope we have an audience, but it's between Emily and her mom and me.
I would say, like, you know, I did think about it, because you are letting people into your personal stories, which come with, and there's definitely things where when we were learning how to, like, kind of, how do we go about this and how are we going to talk about these subjects? I think a lot of it was, is there anything off the table? And really, our family's an open book. It always has been. And I think that's what made it easy. And kind of also, I think that was what made it also really important for me to make sure that we got to do this, because I think there is, like I said, there's that vulnerability factor of inviting people in and telling them the truth. And I think that I don't feel judged by it. And it's not something that we wouldn't talk about anyways. If someone asked, you know, I was definitely raised that way. My mom and dad were very, like, they're very big on telling the truth and very big on, you know, you are who you are. So it's like, you know, people are going to accept it or they're not. And you have to learn to deal with that as well. But the reality is, it's not like we're yelling at each other, but you could tell there's times where I was like, that wasn't okay. Like, in the middle, and that makes it real. That's real life. Real life.
You do.
Life
And
happens.
That's what's so interesting to me. And you communicate very well, obviously, like, or I shouldn't say obviously, but for everybody, when they listen, and you obviously have real conversations, but it doesn't mean you're always agreeing with each other. Like, you will say that, or Jean will be like, or then your mom will be like, no, I don't know. I don't think it's that. And you'll be like, no, mom doesn't.
Mom, Kay will be crying.
I do laugh when you both correct Jean, though. It's funny. I do laugh, Jean. I'm like, I'm at your dinner table and they cut you off, and I'm just gonna take another bite of my food and look down.
Well, one of my wife's great comments toward me is, well, that's as you remember it.
Yes, that's epic. I forgot that. I'm trying to add that to my vernacular and to my into my how I talk to people. Oh, that's how you remember. It's such a good tool.
So we joke about, we'll go, oh, well, as I recall, or as I remember it, because the way he remembers it is sometimes totally far off in a different world. And we're like, what, were you in the same place at the same time when that happened? So it's just kind of
one of the things I think that makes it easy for us is we've always known we were adopted. Always. All four of us knew from day one we've been adopted. So as I said to Emily many times, it's like you go up to someone and say, "Hi, I'm Jean. I have brown eyes. I play the trumpet. I run, and I'm adopted."
Yeah.
It's just
part of our intro. Yeah.
It's just an appendix. It's part of our intro. So it's no problem about talking about it, because that's what we are. I used to walk. My dad was a school teacher, and I used to go to the same school that he taught at. We walked down the hall, and my dad was 6'2", and I'm 5'6", and people would come up and say, "You know, you look just like your dad." And I'd say, "What?" You know, and then I'd immediately say, "Well, that can't be because I'm adopted." You know, we both did. We had blue eyes, but other than that, that was about it. You know.
And I think that's a little bit funny thing for our family is that we're all adopted and we're all tiny. So no one's, I'm only 4'11", so like we all kind of fit together like little puzzle pieces. So it's ironic so I don't think it's as big of a difference when people see us. I think they automatically, like, you resemble each other to some degree. And I also know families that they're actually blood related and they look nothing alike. So to some degree, you just kind of, it doesn't matter. But we did talk about that, or my mom said, "Did you guys notice you both do this?" And my dad and I both do it. We'll say, "Hi, I'm Emily. Nice to meet you." And yeah, I do this, I do that. And I'm adopted. It's like one of the first things And at first we thought it was a defense mechanism. And the reality is, I said, I think it's because it's our identity. It's something we identify as and include it as. And I think we're both very proud of it in a lot of ways. So it's become part of our introduction.
So as I remember it, all three of you do fit. Did I use it right? All three of you do fit like puzzle pieces when I met all three of you at the same time in Orange County.
Right.
That's a weak attempt to use it, but I'm gonna get better at it as I remember it. That's coming. That's coming. Let me circle to something else real quick. The name of the show, I forgot to ask you. So, hey, am I adopted? Where'd that come from?
Dad, do you want to tell the story?
No, you tell the story. It came from you.
So as I recall,
I ever said that.
Yeah.
That's not my part of my lexicon.
I tell the story of when people go, how'd you know you were adopted? So I said, as I recall, I remember running into the house, into the kitchen. I was about 3 years old. Like I think I'd been playing outside with my sister and the neighbor kids. And I said to my mom, I go, hey, am I adopted? And she like grasped, this like, yes. And like waiting, but you're a little kid. So I was like, oh, okay. And I ran outside and said, yeah, I am. That was it. And so we thought that was a funny thing because anyone who's adopted at some point is like, oh, am I adopted? I'm adopted. Or like there's a questioning in your head of what that means. So my dad liked that idea. And it's actually, as I recall the story, that is my story. No one else recalls that story at all that way.
And you knew ahead of time. You knew before that you were adopted.
Yeah. The interesting part after that was there was these books in my mind. And that's how I remember it. There was these books that my mom read to me as an infant is how I say the story. And I had never seen the books before. I thought I made this up. And my mom, when we were talking about doing the podcast, and I said, I also have to clarify, like, is this even true? Because this is what I've been telling people my entire life. And now I'm like, am I lying? And she comes down with these like ancient books and they existed. And I was like, it was that weird moment where I was like, wait, so your memory somehow remembers these things. And sure enough, she said, I read this book to you from day one. And I was like, that's how I said I remembered it. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. And Adam, not all the stories in the family are good. And so we've had a tragedy in the family, and as you listen through the episodes, you'll learn it. See, I'm foreshadowing now. Now I want you to listen, right? Okay, it's not all giggles. Yeah. So we had a 17-year battle, and that's a little difficult. We had one episode on that, and I've talked to Emily since then, saying that we just didn't go deep in that one. We were hesitant on that one, and I want to do another one. I want to do another one on that when we get to it, and there'll be some crying in that one.
Yeah, I think there was the first time, I think that's the best part of it is the fact that you're willing to talk about things. And I think that I'm hoping that people listen, that it enables them to want to talk to me. It opens up that door where like, hey, I want to share this. And sometimes, because sharing is such a thing. I mean, we're natural storytellers as part of like the human way of doing things. And so I think there's something that's really interesting in that and what comes of it and the sympathy and the empathy that comes from storytelling. And so to me, they're not always good stories, and that's okay. But it's life. Everyone has had hard times, and it's, I think the positive of it is you get to see this family that's coming together years later and talking about it again. And again, hoping there's people out there that, want to come on this platform and tell, because you never know who's listening and who it could reach.
Yeah, we talk about something that almost every adoptee is going to think of at one time, and it's finding their birth parents. And Kay and Emily and Amy and I all have totally different approaches to that. And that's an interest that shows up in the episodes, and that's pretty interesting.
And I see as this evolves, and many shows have kind of gone in this direction, but the idea gets bigger and bigger, like you mentioned, Gene. So when you first started, you're like, okay, well, we got 4 episodes. I know there's 4 of us. But now, of course, you're going deeper. The show's getting deeper. You're exploring more. And as you mentioned, this at some point you'll be bringing on other guests, possibly that are adoptees, to tell their stories. So it's become already this platform. And I know we've talked kind of offline a little bit about your concept of the community around this and what building a community around this show and this concept would look like. Maybe just share, broad strokes. What would that community look like, or what kind of things? Why would that be a benefit?
Well, in our mission statement, we use the words relate and share. So we're going to put ourselves out there. Hopefully people will join us and want to relate their story. They've listened to us. Now they want to relate their story and share with us and the audience. Now, at that point, I'm really thinking it is important that the audience is important. Yeah. Although I might just be happy enough to hear, if you were adopted, Adam, just hear your story, and that's fine. I don't care if anyone's listening, but those
are the best shows, by the way, Gene. Just FYI, they are. No, they are. And I've studied this. Like David Letterman's, the Johnny Carson's, the everything. Seinfeld, like they created content for themselves. Just throwing that out there. So what you're saying isn't just a comment. Like, I'm not saying I'm a great. I've read the greats, and they've all said exactly that in one way, shape, or form. Like all of them, what you just said.
And Emily,
I just wanted to let you know that. That's all.
Interesting.
Cool. Emily just commented on storytelling. We're all storytellers in our family. Yeah. And I'd be excited when someone else comes on and tells our family their story. And then we can relate to them. And eventually, I think Emily has some ideas what happens when we get 5,000 or 6,000 of those people commenting and being guests. What do we do next, Emily? This is all evolving, but I know Emily has some thoughts.
Yeah, I like when you say community, I said, I think that's originally kind of what I was looking for, even without knowing it, is that because like I said, again, you look up books and you look up podcasts and things to listen to. My dad and I, we do half marathons together. So we train for half marathons. And that's where I started listening to podcasts, was that I couldn't listen to music for 13 hours or 13 miles. Yeah. And I started to train listening to podcasts. It was entertaining. And, you're running for 2 hours to train so many days a week. And so it was something that just kept my mind off of the run and listening to these cool stories. And that was my biggest actual like mentor, without them even knowing it, is Kate Hudson and Oliver Hudson do Sibling Revelry. And it's about talking to other people and their siblings. And I just love their show so much. And I listened and listened and listened, and no one was adopted. And I was like, where's my community? Where's mine? And that was really it. And so when we finally started talking about it, it was like, we found one adoption podcast that we listened to and I listened to one episode, and immediately it was like, I knew this person and I never met them in my life.
Wow.
I don't know where he lives in like Ohio. And I listened to his story, and it was so emotional for me to feel like I immediately related to someone that I didn't even know about this subject. I ride horses, so I can talk about horses all day long with lots of people, and that's relatable. But this was so important to me, and to hear how it affected them, it was so impactful. And so I was like, I really want to do this, and I want to create that community, and I would like to be able to have where it's like, maybe there's meetups. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah. But it would be one of those. I just know how much it made me feel good, that I was like, if I can do that for other people and get a community around, I just be helpful too, resourceful for others. Yeah. That would be great too.
And Emily has thrown around the word foundation. And I think we're a long way from that. But there are other podcasts that have contributors or whatever they're called. Yeah. And they have meetups, whether they're virtual or live or whatever. And I think, right now it's the three of us and you. So I don't think we need to have a meetup. We've already had one meetup 2 weeks ago, right? At your Mission Matters meeting here in Orange County. But
that's what you asked for when you had talked about use the word community, Emily. It's work. No.
I love it. I love it.
Here's a plug. That's what Mission Matters is about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just said, watch
why
what you asked for. That's all I said.
I think there are other
Mm.
podcast promoters and podcast
Oh,
hosts
yeah.
in the world, but through my involvement with Mission Matters
Mhm.
early on, I decided if we were going to do this, that's who I was going to use, and that's who I was going to sign the contract with. And so far, it's been everything we've thought about, hasn't it, Emily?
Absolutely. And even just our local meetup, the Orange County Mission Matters meetup was, so I already actually keep in touch with 3 of the people that I talked to that night.
Wow. That's
And
amazing.
because just being able to keep, again, sense of community, talking to
Yeah.
people, they were like, how's it going? We're listening, and they were like, and they're like, I think we know some people that like to share their stories. So it's just a way to connect to other people that again, that's the goal, I think, for us, is to connect with other people and hope that they want to share their stories, or enthrall them to make them feel like it's not so scary. So
well, I have to say, I mean, this has been great. I mean, I'm excited for the next episode. That's my weekend listening. I'm going to be listening to episode 3, a daughter's story. I listened to a father's story. I listened to the first episode, so that's on my listening list. But that being said, I have to ask you both, Emily, Jean. I mean, what's next? What's next for you? What's next for the show?
What do you think, Dad?
Well, I think it's about time. I think we have all the pieces in place to go out and ask people if they'd like to share their stories. I mean, we couldn't do that unless there was a way that they could respond to us. And there were some graphics, and we have a website. We have a YouTube channel. We're ready to go. Thanks to Adam, your group, and Emily, we're ready. I mean, I have a huge database in the tens of thousands who know me from my law and my real estate work. And I'm not bashful, and I can just see it's going to say, the subject line is going to say, hey, are you adopted? And and then I'm going to go in and say, you know me from real estate, but did you know I'm one of 4 adoptees in the same family? And we've got a podcast, and we'd love to hear your story. Respond here. And that's all I'm going to say.
Oh my gosh, you're going to get a lot of responses.
I think I'm going to do about 100 at a time, because I'm even if I got 2 or 3 responses and we scheduled them, that would take us for another month. So I think we're on our way, but we had to get there.
Yeah.
Don't you think we're there now, Emily?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then I think my final thing to say would be, for the vision of the show, is like, my dad did mention a foundation. And I think ultimately, if we can create this platform and have a community, I would like to have a foundation, because I would like to have, like I said, I would like to have resources for adoptees specifically that we could help. There's always, like, as a kid growing up, and let's say you're applying for college, there's grants and whatnot, but it would be nice to be able to give back specifically to something that means so much to us. So that would be I think the big goal for me. That would be something I'd like to do, because I'm already getting what I want out of it. I get to have this fun time with my family talking about this stuff. So I'm fortunate. So I'd like to give back as well to other people.
That's amazing. And if somebody wants to, I don't know if it's live yet, but correct me if I'm wrong. Is the website live?
Yes.
All right. Yep. So next steps, somebody wants to check out the website, check out the platform overall. How do they do that?
So the website is just heyamiadopted.com. And if anyone wants to, any questions, or they want to maybe talk to us or whatnot, if they just do info@heyamiadopted.com, we'll get right back to you. So we're on it.
Our Kay is the gatekeeper.
Yeah.
Kay is going to be the gatekeeper of info at Hey, Am I Adopted? And then she'll pass it on to both of us, because many times Emily's sitting on a horse or out working, but Kay is ready to be the gatekeeper, and she's got a pretty expansive personality, so she's the perfect person to do that.
Fantastic.
52 years, Adam. I've been married. It'll be 52 years in June.
Amazing. Congratulations. That's amazing. Well, I have to say, this has been I've done over 6,000 episodes. This is my first father-daughter episode, and thoroughly enjoyed myself. My jaw, my cheeks hurt. I've laughed so hard today. I have some new words. I have some new phrases, man. I hope for everybody listening and watching this, I hope everyone got a lot of enjoyment out of this, because I sure did. We'll put the website, all that information into the show notes so that you can just click on the links and head right on over. And speaking to the audience, if this is your first time with us and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe button. This is a daily show. We have many more great stories that we're bringing to you, and we don't want you to miss a thing. And if you've been watching us for a long time or listening for a long time and you haven't left that review yet, definitely get that review in. We definitely appreciate it. And Emily, Jean, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been so much fun.
Thanks for doing that. Bye, Emily.